Imagine this, you're just 22 years old, a wide-eyed kid from the sun-drenched orchards of California's Central Valley, where the air smells of ripe almonds and endless summer days, now inexplicably strapped into the shuddering, oil-scented belly of a B-24 Liberator bomber dubbed the Spotted Ass Ape, a irreverent moniker the crew slapped on after one too many poker games, nodding to its mottled camouflage paint job that looked like a primate's derriere under a bad dye job. You're humming 30,000 feet above the merciless, ink-black wilds of Alaska, where the air is so razor-thin and bone-chilling it claws at your lungs like shattered glass wrapped in frost. It's the grim zenith of World War II, late 1943, and the fog-shrouded Aleutian Islands chain, those jagged volcanic teeth biting into the Pacific, serves as a foggy, windswept frontline in America's desperate bid to thwart Japanese incursions across the Bering Sea, the treacherous back door to the continental U.S. The weight of the free world feels oppressively near, with headlines back home screaming of Midway and Guadalcanal, but for you and your 8 brothers in arms, men you'd share smokes, secrets, and near-death laughs with, one single, fateful wrong turn amid a maelstrom of needle-sharp ice crystals and 80-knot gales will obliterate it all in an instant. No crackling radio lifeline. No swift cavalry of rescue choppers. Just the savage, indifferent embrace of 84 interminable days in a frozen hellscape that doesn't just test the limits of human endurance, it redefines them, forging survivors from the wreckage of shattered dreams and requiring every shred of raw ingenuity, flickering faith, unyielding brotherhood, and that primal, guttural stubbornness to refuse the dark one more inch. This is the visceral, heart-clenching odyssey of Leon Crane, a name too long consigned to the dusty footnotes of survival lore, yet a beacon of forgotten heroism whose tale of defiance against the Arctic small will grip you like a vice and leave you pondering your own breaking point. If pulse-racing stories of grit, glory, and the razor-edged dance with death ignite something fierce in you, smash that like button right now to summon the YouTube god's favor, drop a comment with your own brush with the wild, and subscribe with the bell cranked on for weekly plunges into history's most audacious tales of the unbreakable human spark. Strap in tight, we're plummeting into the ice, and there's no eject button. It all erupts into catastrophe on November 23, 1943, smack in the teeth of the brutal Aleutian campaign, where U.S. airmen wage a shadowy war of attrition against Imperial Japan's bid to turn the Northern Pacific into a launching pad for mainland strikes. Heavily armed behemoths like the Spotted Ass Ape are the campaign's unsung mules, shuttling critical engines, radar parts, and fresh-faced replacements across the storm-lashed frontier to sustain the relentless patrols that keep the skies defiantly allied. Leon Crane, that rangy 22-year-old tail gunner with a mop of unruly dark hair perpetually tousled by cockpit drafts, a lopsided grin masking the ache of letters from his Modesto family tucked in his flight suit, mans the rear .50 caliber turrets, his twin barrels eternally vigilant for the glint of Zero fighters in the mirrors, fingers itching on triggers that have yet to sing in anger. Born and bred in the golden haze of California's farm country, where he dreamed of skies bigger than the endless flatlands, Leon enlisted straight out of high school in '42, seduced by recruitment posters promising adventure and the thunder of props that drowned out the humdrum of harvest seasons. But by now, after grueling stateside training flights and the soul-sucking tedium of Alaskan patrols, he's sniffed enough danger to recognize its metallic tang on the wind. His crew is a patchwork quilt of America's heartland everyman, Skipper Lieutenant William "Bill" Howe, the unflappable pilot from rural Ohio, built like a plow horse with a gravelly voice that could steady a squadron mid-dogfight and hands that coaxed miracles from stuttering engines, co-pilot and navigator Lieutenant Henry M. Hank Sharp, a bespectacled bookworm from Seattle whose meticulous star charts and wind calculations were the crew's North Star, until they weren't, Bombardier Lieutenant John W. Johnny Pritchard, the quick-witted Bostonian with a knack for defusing bombs and tensions alike, Flight Engineer Sergeant Robert Bob Rundall, a wiry tinkerer from frost-kissed Minnesota farms, whose calloused fingers could rebuild a carburetor blindfolded, Radio Operator Sergeant William A. Willie Dalby, the quiet Texan whose Morse code tapped out homesick hymns in the dead of night, waist gunners Sergeant John J. Jack Reinert, a Milwaukee brewery heir turned lead slinger with a laugh like a howitzer, and Sergeant Paul A. Frenchy Navarre, the Cajun sharpshooter from Louisiana bayous whose drawl wove tall tales of gator hunts, and ball turret gunner Sergeant Harold E. Hal Nygren, the baby-faced Swede from Minnesota who crammed his slight frame into that coffin-like glass womb below the fuselage, emerging pale but grinning after each sortie. 9 souls in total, forged into a family by the alchemy of high-altitude banter, shared flasks of bootleg hooch, and the unspoken pact that what happens in the cockpit stays there, until the mountain intervenes. The day's orders read like a postcard from Hell's Vacation Planner, a milk-run ferry hop, southbound from Ladd Field in Fairbanks, the Army's frozen outpost amid the Arctic's endless twilight, where barracks reek of wet wool and diesel, to Elmendorf Army Airfield hugging Anchorage's fjord-laced coast, for a routine pit stop of engine teardowns, propeller tweaks, and maybe a fresh coat of that Ass Ape camo. Just 300 nautical miles of easy flying, climb out over the Yukon flats, thread the Alaska Range's gaps, drop the bird like a hot potato, then thaw out with stateside chow, spam fritters, powdered eggs, and a stack of backlogged mail that might include Evelyn's perfume-scented notes for Leon. Piece of pie, right? Wrong. Alaska's weather isn't a forecast, it's a living, breathing leviathan, ancient, capricious, with the temperament of a grizzly roused from hibernation. They spool up into a dawn that's more bruised than gold, props chewing the frigid air into a deafening hymn, but halfway through the climb, the beast awakens, a monolithic low-pressure bomb detonates from the Gulf of Alaska, unleashing katabatic winds clocking 60 to 70 knots that buffet the wings like a drunkard's fists, visibility cratering to a swirling whiteout of 0 feet. Thermometers plummeting to 40 below zero Fahrenheit where spit freezes mid-air and metal conducts cold like a superconductor of despair. Rime ice accretes on the leading edges like demonic growths, half-inch spikes adding 500 pounds of dead weight, warping lift into liability, forcing Bill to nurse the throttles in a losing wrestle for altitude. The intercom devolves into a cacophony of clipped urgency, Hank's voice cracking over wind roar, ice at 12 o'clock, skipper, shed it or we're done, Willie's frantic keying of maydays that echo into ether, Morse dots swallowed by static snow, Leon's turret whining as he scans the void behind, heart hammering against his Mae West vest. Engines gasp and belch black smoke under the strain, altimeters spinning lies in the soup. Then, the hammerfall, a vicious microburst downdraft, born of colliding air masses over the peaks, yanks them into an uncontrolled spiral, instruments tumbling like dice in a mug. It cascades in a blur of eternity-compressed seconds. The Spotted Ass Ape starboard wing snags a fong of Talkeetna granite at 7,000 feet, 50 air miles northwest of the nearest fur trapper's shack, the airframe disintegrating in a cataclysmic ballet of rending aluminum, exploding rivets, and plexiglass shrapnel that slices like shrapnel from a Luftwaffe flak burst. The bomber cartwheels end over end through the gloaming, a 65-foot behemoth reduced to a tumbling dervish of fire and fury, slamming belly first into a snow-choked ravine where it erupts in a primordial fireball, a false aurora of kerosene-fed orange that sears retinas and singes brows for one hallucinatory heartbeat before the drifts quench it to acrid steam. 9 aboard when the wheels left the tarmac. Cruel arithmetic claims one outright, Lieutenant Hank Sharp, pinned in the cockpit maelstrom by collapsing spars, his final act a strangled warning over the dying intercom before flames claim him, a brotherly ghost haunting the survivor's guilt forever. The 8 who claw free? A ragged cluster of miracles laced with agony, fractured femurs and cracked ribs grinding like gravel with every breath, lacerations weeping crimson that flash freezes into ruby filigree on parkas, second-degree burns blistering where fuel lines ruptured, concussions blooming headaches like thunderclaps behind the eyes, and the insidious creep of hypothermia, a velvet thief stealing warmth cell by cell. Leon staggers out last from the tail section's relative mercy, his .50 cal mount a crumpled throne, ribs splintered into white-hot pokers with each inhale, face furrowed by a 6-inch gash from cockpit debris that carves his cheek like a duelist's mark, blood crusting into a frozen mask as the -40 gale scours exposed flesh raw. They're marooned in a glacial cirque, a colossal, sheer-walled amphitheater carved by millennia of ice, ringed by 2,000-foot basalt cliffs veined with icefalls and pocked by bottomless crevasses yawning like trapdoors to the underworld, entombed in a featureless sea of powder where black spruce huddle like refugees on talus slopes, their needles brittle as accusations. No game trail scars the snow, no Athabascan village smoke curls on the horizon. The nearest salvation? A punishing 60-mile trek through crevasse fields and avalanche chutes to Mount McKinley's flanks, if legs could bear it, which they can't. Scavenged bounty from the corpse of their ride? A beggar's feast, 3 dented tins of corned beef hash, now half dissolved in slush, a clutch of Hershey bars warped and gritty, emergency signal mirrors fogged with soot, Mae West vests shredded for bandages, and a motley armory of wreck-pride tools, a bloodied hatchet with a hickory haft, coils of picture wire for snares, a flare pistol with 6 shells that might summon mirages, a Colt .45 automatic down to 12 rounds after panicked post-crash pops at shadows, plus oddments like a magneto compass, a signal whistle, and Hal's ball turret heater, its coils a potential stove if Bob's genius could resurrect it. The night falls like a guillotine, stars wheeling overhead in mocking indifference, as the wind composes its dirge, a low moan rising to shrieks that mimic the crew's unspoken dread. Day 1 cracks open under a pallid overcast that leaches color from the world, the initial adrenaline high of survival curdling into the cold calculus of doom as medkits reveal the toll, Johnny's left tibia protruding through wool trousers like a snapped sapling, splinted with a propeller blade and lashed with bootlaces, Frenchie's hands pulped from gripping the waist guns during the tumble, fingers ballooning purple. Willie's ankle twisted to hamburger in the radio compartment collapse. Bill Howe, blood streaking his flight cap like war paint, musters the remnants with a voice honed by command, a quick head count around the fire's tentative glow, a stark inventory of the mangled bird, fuselage split like a gutted fish, wings sheared to aluminum confetti, and a vow etched in frost: we're Army Air Forces, boys. We don't quit. We adapt, we endure, we get home, for Hank, for the fight, for the girls waiting. Hypothermia's siege begins subtly, a pins and needles torpor in extremities, shivers evolving to teeth-rattling quakes that rack the frame like seismic aftershocks, countered by motion's tyranny. They burrow into the lee of the wreck's tail boom, excavating a snow cave with aluminum shards and gloved fists, walls 18 inches thick and arched against spindrift, the floor scraped flat and padded with layered parachute nylon, seat foam, and balsa instrument panels for a frail barrier twixt flesh and fatal chill. Fire, that flickering talisman against the void, kindles from Leon's battered Zippo, its flint struck with prayerful precision on tinder of scraped birch bark and spruce twigs shaved paper-thin, nursed into a bed of coals ringed by green alder to smother smoke and hoard heat, though the gale conspires to snuff it hourly, demanding endless foraging into thigh-deep drifts. Water, deceptively plentiful yet deadly in its frozen guise, yields to helmet bowls of packed snow set direct on embers, melting to a cloudy boil laced with pine ash, sipped from tin cups to combat the paradox where endless moisture dehydrates through evaporation and exertion. But food? The true specter, a hollow-bellied demon gnawing from within. The wilds proffer a miserly table. They commence with boot leather simmered hours into a leathery pottage strained through shirt tails, its tannins bitter as betrayal, graduate to tree butter, a vile emulsion pounded from spruce cambium, that green underbark scraped with belt knives, kneaded with sticky resin globules and thinned with meltwater, dolloped onto tongue like penance, each swallow a vow to Evelyn's apple pie, 3,000 miles south. Scurvy's shadow looms early, gums tenderizing, joints protesting vitamin C's absence, warded by spruce-tip chews brewed into astringent tea that numbs more than it nourishes. By week's end, their phantasms adrift in oversized A2 jackets, beards encasing faces like lichen on stone, eyes ringed panda black from sleepless vigils against wind-whipped canvas flaps. Frostbite's harvest reaps cruelly, toes blackened to mummies under wrappings of sock lint and newsprint, demanding nightly thaws in lukewarm melt that blister fresh agonies. Hal loses a pinky tip to dry gangrene, amputated with hatchet and belt tourniquet in a rite of stoic screams. Infections bloom unchecked, pus yellow blooms on Jack's shrapnel gouges, fever spiking to delirious mutterings, for want of sulfa powders lost in the blaze. Leon, the crew's threadbare optimist whose California twang once mimicked Bogart for laughs, parcels morale like precious rations. Over pine smoke evenings, he spins yarns of Modesto rodeos and phantom stakes. Hell, if the Reaper shows, tell him we're booked. View here's killer, but the service sucks, his quip's a shield against the creeping entropy. Yet solitude's serpent coils tighter. Search aircraft from Elmendorf's 54th Fighter Group etch vapor trails overhead, tantalizing roars on days 3, 7, 12, that tease salvation's proximity. They counter with ingenuity's desperation, signal fires of oiled rags and damp boughs belching black pillars, snow mirrors flashing Morse please when sun dares peak, even a crude reflector from polished aluminum foil stapled to drift sides. But the cirque betrays them, a topographic trap where acoustics warp engine drone to distant thunder, updraft scattering smoke into harmless haze, very pistol flares arcing high only to gutter in the murk like false hopes. Each unanswered overflight chips at resolve, birthing whispers in the dark, they think we're ghosts already. Authentic survival here, in this anvil of ice and isolation, transcends grim persistence. It's an alchemical frenzy of improvisation, where idleness equals entombment and every breath births a hack or hustle. They decode the tundra's cryptic bounty with trial and error's bloody tuition. Snares evolve from twisted radio antenna to figure 4 deadfalls baited with fish guts from gutted cans, snaring snowshoe hares, those elongated phantoms bounding on oversized pads, their pelts a fleeting luxury for glove linings. Ptarmigan pursuits turn the crew into shambling hunters, white sheets draped for camouflage. Birds flushed from willow thickets with thrown branches or the .45's dwindling thunder when a clean headshot pierces the flock's blizzard ballet. Berries? Non-existent in November's iron grip, but rose hips, tart survivors on thorny shrubs, yield a mash for anti-scurvy poultices smeared on sores. Day 18 dawns feral, a wolverine, that squat engine of malice with jaws like bear traps and a musk like rotting meat, erupts from a boulder scree, eyes burning yellow, lips peeled in a snarl, lunging for the hare's trust outside the lean-to, its own ribs a xylophone of starvation. Ammo barren after a coyote feint the night prior, the clash devolves to barbarism. Bill charges center with the hatchet whirling in overhead arcs, blade biting fur in shallow furrows. Leon and Jack flank with improvised mauls, prop shaft fragments wrapped in sock grips, leaping onto the beast's flanks to rain blows on skull and spine. Frenchie circles with a spear of rebar, thrusting for vitals amid the snow-flecked frenzy of claws raking parkas and fangs snapping inches from throats. It ends in a guttural yelp, the 40-pound devil stilled after 20 minutes of primal thunder, leaving the men gashed and gasping, faces alight with the wild's electric aftershock. That prize? A sybaritic windfall, hide stretched taut for boot patches, organs, liver steaming, heart pulsing, gobbled raw for iron and warmth, a coppery ritual that turns stomachs but steals sinew, haunches slow-roasted on greenwood spits till fat drips to flare the fire, apportioned in equitable slabs that swell bellies for the first time in weeks, marrow sucked from femurs like forbidden nectar, enough vitality to knit a rib or two, staving off the shadow of collapse. Water rituals refine, snow selected from sun-warmed hollows to minimize sediment, triple-boiled indented mess kits to exorcise pathogens, augmented with electrolyte, cocktails, of urine in extremis, sterile, if foul, to balance salts when sweat's a memory. Sheltercraft ascends a ladder of necessity, the snow trench begets a quinsy dome, snow piled 2 feet thick and hollowed with steam from body heat, ventilated by bamboo flues, walls buttressed by interlaced spruce boughs lashed with boot cord, exterior daubed in mud mortar against probing drafts, interior partitioned into a sick bay for Johnny's leg-elevating cot of lashed skis, a mess nook with tin can galley, and a central hearth fed by a jury-rigged oil stove, Bob's masterpiece, the ball turret heater's coils jury-rigged to burn scavenged hydraulic fluid in controlled sips. Even sanitation bows to order, a latrine pit downslope, screened by tarpaulin, ashes sprinkled for odor's illusion, dignity's last outpost in descent. But the psyche's coliseum rages fiercest, an invisible war where isolation amplifies every creak to catastrophe. Christmas Eve, day 32, slinks in unannounced, no tinsel or turkey, just the circ's acoustics twisting gusts into mocking chorales, evoking church bells or maternal calls from the ether. Battery lanterns flicker their final watts as the crew curls fetal in shared sleeping bags, improvising hymns, Silent Night, warbled flat and fierce, passing a nog of spruce gin, resin-fermented melt, that burns like absolution. Leon, journal balanced on knees, etches by fire glow on salvaged logbook pages, ink freezing mid-sentence. Jingle bells rode the gale tonight, echoes from Modesto streets, or the hope we bottle against this white death. Hank would have laughed, called it hooey. New Year's Eve unleashes apocalypse, a mega blizzard, the season's coup de grace, hammers 60 inches in 48 hours, powder avalanching from rims to entomb the dome under a 6-foot pall, air holes clogged to suffocating twilight, carbon dioxide thickening the air to drowsy venom. Emergence demands heroic toil, shifts of 2, rotating every 20 minutes to forestall collapse, clawing an escape shaft with ads and desperation, lungs searing on recycled breaths, emerging to a reborn wasteland where drifts sculpt surreal hoodoos and the spruce grove vanishes under berms. Day 45's trial etches deepest scars. Bob Rundall, the engineer's unerring logic fraying under caloric debt, succumbs to the mind's mutiny, deliriums of his St. Paul hearth, phantom scents of lutefisk and pipe tobacco luring him upright in the witching hour. Barefoot in sub-zero, he lurches downslope toward imagined trail lights, murmuring Ma's waitin', boots abandoned in trance. Hal and Willie bolt after, plunging through thigh-suck drifts, tackling him inches from a crevasse's sapphire throat, blue ice groaning like a lover scorned. Restraint follows mercy, velcroed watches ensure no solo drifts, tales traded in the dark to anchor the drifting, Frenchie's bayou ghost stories of Rougarou, Jack's Milwaukee bar brawls, hammering home the creed, fracture alone, and the wild reclaims you, cleave as one, and even gods might envy your fire. By day 60, hope's ember gutters perilously low, a will-o'-the-wisp in a maelstrom, as the crew devolves to spectral husks, frame weights plummeting to 100 to 110 pounds from 170-plus starts, cheeks hollow to skull shadows, beards a tangled thatch of hoarfrost and grease, eyes recessed in bruise-purple sockets that gleam with feral cunning or defeat's glaze. Scurvy manifests in florid horror, gums bleeding rivulets at each pine chew, joints swollen to stove-hot knots that hobble hunts, skin mottling with petechiae like a leper's map, countered by desperate infusions of willow bark tea, its salicin a crude aspirin against the ache. Leon's mitts, thrice frostbitten relics blackened to leather and numb as driftwood, betray him on snare resets, fumbling knots that once tied fly lines back home, fevers cycle unchecked, turning nights to sweat-soaked thrashings where morphine dreams blend with Hank's accusatory shade. Tensions simmer to flashpoints, spats over the last hair's drumstick, accusations that Bill's rations favor the hale, quelled by Howe's iron arbitration and Leon's diffusing ditties, but the psychic toll mounts, suicidal murmurs in fevered lulls, faith's pillars cracking under, why us, refrains. Yet in Nadir's velvet throat, Providence's filaments snag, faint harmonics on scavenged crystal sets catch bush pilot chatter, Athabascan scouts from Talkeetna River villages, patrolling traplines on snowshoes, relay sightings of white men's smoke like bad spirit to trading posts. The linchpin? Julius Scully Sisk, a leathern sourdough of 50 winters, face crevassed like canyon walls, pipe clenched eternal, legs pistoning on bare-gut snowshoes, who tops a call on day 72 and pins their fire's greasy plume against the aurora's glow, 22 miles from his Martin line. His relay, mushing 40 miles to a radiophone in a blizzard, ignites Elmendorf's frenzy. The 28th Composite Group scrambles spotters, flares stitching the night like fiery sutures, ground parties fanning from native guides versed in the range's treacheries. February 15, 1944, day 84, a date seared into souls like a brand, shatters the stasis with symphonic roar. Twin C-47 Dakotas, those corrugated queens of the cargo realm, claw into the updraft-riddled bowl, circling in a vortex of propwash that scours snow to white tornadoes, bay doors yawning to birth a cascade of bounty, chutes blooming like lethal lilies, payloads thudding home, 50-pound crates of spam and K-rations gleaming tinfoil-wrapped, wool greatcoats and mucklucks furred for sub-zero grace. Syrettes of morphine and sulfadiazine to lance infections boils, bouillon cubes for savory broths that coax tears, even cartons of Camels and Hershey's to resurrect taste buds numb to paste. Ragged hosannas erupt, fist pumps weakening to clutches, voices raw as stripped wire, while the drops claim 2 casualties, a crate pulverizing the lean-to, another vanishing into crevasse blue. Then, the pantheon descends, a quartet of bush-flying demigods, aces in threadbare Piper J, 3 Cubs, their 65-horsepower Continentals purring like contented cats, and a Stinson State Route 9 reliant on skis for the heavy lift, nurse their crates through thermals that buck like broncos, alighting on a strip the crew's delirium-fueled labor stomped flat, 400 feet of spruce log rollers and packed powder, flagged with red rags and prayer. Extraction choreographs as tender triage, basket stretchers slung from belly hooks ferry the friliest, Bob, skeletal and murmuring mechanics in sleep, Johnny, leg a bandaged log, white-knuckled against rotor wash, Hal, pinky stumped but beaming like a kid on Christmas delayed. Willie and Frenchie scramble aboard on ropes scaled like Everest's Hillary, Jack hauling himself by sheer spite. Bill, last of the hail, coordinates with clipped precision till his turn. Leon ascends penultimate, harness biting into parka as the Cub's winch hauls him skyward, boots dangling over the Cirque's maw, wind keening a farewell, twisting mid-air for a parting salvo at the valley's tyrant, the B-24's rusted vertebrae half-buried, their tally marks on fuselage scarred by calving ice, footprints effaced to virgin sheet. "We licked you clean, you frozen Sanovich," he rasps, the words whipped away as wings bite air, lifting toward the sun's defiant arc. Rescue doesn't quench Leon Crane's forge fire, it tempers him to adamantine edge. Wheeled into Elmendorf's Quonset infirmaries on gurneys slick with melt, he stares down surgeons' scalpels, gangrenous digits spared by 4 penicillin drips and hyperbaric prayers, ribs knitting crooked but serviceable under plaster cages, the facial scar twisting his grin into a perpetual rogue's badge. Discharged against advice after 3 weeks of bedeviling nurses with escape plots, he straps back into cockpits for 50-odd sorties over the Marianas and Iwo Jima, the distinguished flying cross pinned for a milk run turned melee where his tail gun stitched a kamikaze's wing at 400 yards, proof the ice hadn't dulled his edge. Demobbed in autumn 45 amid VJ Day's confetti storms, he hotfoots to Modesto's sun-baked streets, wooing Evelyn under the same oak where they'd necked pre-war, their 46 wedding a riot of swing tunes and tear-streaked toasts, vows exchanged with Hank's dog tags tucked in pocket for luck. Fatherhood follows swift, 3 offspring, 2 boys to chase his aviation ghost, a girl with Evelyn's eyes, raised in a craftsman bungalow amid orchard mists, where bedtime tales swapped Pacific foxholes for Talkeetna snares, teaching that heroes aren't born, they're thawed. Retirement's quieter cadence, post-1970s as a crop duster instructor, birth's legacy, his 1993 opus, 84 Days, the ordeal of the Spotted Ass Ape, a 300-page gut-punch of facsimile journals, pages warped by melt stains, hand-sketched diagrams of deadfalls and quinzies, crew mugshots yellowed with time, and prose stripped bare, no embellished daring-do, just the bone truth. Bravery's a myth for parades, we survived 'cause quit tin wasn't colored in our Crayolas. The cold took our weight, our illusions, but not the knot that tied us tighter than any hawser. The crew? Diaspora tempered by ritual, annual powwows in Dayton VFWs till the 90s thinned ranks, Bill's farm eulogy in 78, Frenchie's jazz-fueled send-off in 89, letters and tapes bridging gaps, bonds a living rebuke to entropy. Echoes resound in Extremis canon, kin to Shackleton's boat journey defiance in Weddell's Crush or Pareto's snowtrek from the Andes crash in Alive, yet Leon's yarn spins quintessentially Yankee, working stiff savvy versus nature's blue blood snobbery, where each improvised potlatch or brotherly dragback from the brink votes defiantly for dawn. Its Lancet lesson? In Oblivion's gape, where pitons snap and compasses spin, it's not bushcraft catechisms or Lady Fortuna's whim that hauls you topside, it's that alchemical brew of grit, the daily, today's the day I fold. Nah, brotherhood's ironclad web, one falls, all anchor, and the feral, unquenchable spark that hisses, not your meat, reaper, the same fire flickering in every soul's core, awaiting its crucible. So, kindred wanderer, what's your abyss? That boardroom gale or midnight doubt, what's the talisman you'd grip, the tale you'd tell to thaw the freeze? Flood the comments with your wilder-than-fiction dispatches, let's kindle a digital longhouse of resilience. If Leon's saga scorched your circuits, pulverize that like, subscribe for the pipeline of World War II enigmas, survival symphonies, and horizon-hunting histories, and toll the bell to never ghost a drop. Till we reconvene in the fray, keep that inner blaze roaring, fierce, linked, unbreakable. Fade to that eternal Alaskan aurora, veils of emerald fire dancing over snowfields that whisper of triumphs yet to carve.